The ambush was perfect. 20 enemy fighters had positioned themselves in a kill zone that gave them overlapping fields of fire on the narrow forest trail. The 8-man SEAL team walked right into it, and within seconds, 2 SEALs were down, the rest pinned behind inadequate cover as automatic weapons fire tore through the vegetation around them. Lieutenant Jake Morrison pressed himself against a fallen log that was disintegrating under the impact of bullets and knew with absolute certainty that his team was about to be wiped out. They were surrounded, outnumbered 3-1, low on ammunition, and the enemy was moving to flank their position. He was calculating how many grenades they had left and whether they could fight their way to better cover when the first enemy fighter's head simply disappeared. 1 second the fighter was advancing with his AK-47 raised. The next, he dropped like a puppet with cut strings. No sound, no muzzle flash. Just sudden, efficient death. Then another enemy fighter fell. Then another. Each one killed with a single shot from a sniper position no one could identify. Morrison grabbed his radio. "All stations, who's providing overwatch? I need coordinates on our sniper support." The response crackled back. "Reaper 1, no friendly sniper assets are assigned to your sector. Repeat, you have no sniper support." But someone was out there in the forest, someone who just killed 3 enemy fighters in under 10 seconds, someone who was systematically dismantling the ambush that should have killed Morrison's entire team. What the SEALs didn't know was that Staff Sergeant Elisa Carter had been in these woods for 6 days, alone and presumed dead after her reconnaissance team was wiped out. What they were about to discover was that sometimes the most dangerous person on the battlefield is the one nobody knows is there. Before I show you how one hidden sniper turned the tables on an enemy ambush and saved 8 SEALs from certain death, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from and hit subscribe, because this story proves that the quietest warriors are often the deadliest. Now let's get into it. 6 days earlier. The helicopter insertion went smoothly, too smoothly in hindsight. Staff Sergeant Elisa Carter and her 3-person reconnaissance team fast roped into a clearing 3 kilometers behind enemy lines under cover of darkness. Their mission simple: locate and identify enemy supply routes, relay intelligence, and extract after 72 hours. Elisa was the team's designated marksman, carrying a suppressed SR-25 precision rifle along with standard kit. At 31, she'd spent 7 years in special operations, the last 4 as one of the few female operators cleared for direct action missions. She'd earned her place through skill, not politics, something she'd proven on a dozen deployments across 3 continents. Her team leader, Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, was a 15-year veteran with the kind of tactical instinct that kept people alive in bad situations. Sergeant Tommy Diaz handled communications, and Corporal Amy Chen was their medic and secondary spotter. They moved through the forest with the practiced silence of professionals, using night vision to navigate terrain that would have been impassable for conventional forces. By dawn, they'd reached their primary observation point, a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley where intelligence suggested the enemy was moving supplies. "Good position," Webb said quietly, scanning the valley through his scope. "Chen, set up our comms relay. Diaz, I want continuous monitoring on enemy frequencies. Carter, find your hide and get eyes on that road." Elisa spent 2 hours constructing a sniper position that would be invisible even from 10 feet away. Natural materials woven into her ghillie suit, a hide built into the terrain itself, firing ports that gave her 300 degrees of observation while keeping her completely concealed. For 2 days, they watched. Enemy vehicles moved through the valley with regularity. Supply trucks, troop transports, occasionally armored vehicles. Elisa documented everything through her rifle scope, calling out details that Chen encrypted and transmitted back to command. On the 3rd day, everything went wrong. They never saw what gave them away. Maybe it was a patrol they'd missed. Maybe someone spotted their helicopter insertion and tracked them. Maybe it was just bad luck. But at 0400 hours, Elisa woke from a brief rest to the sound of Webb's urgent whisper. "Contact. multiple hostiles, closing from 3 directions, were compromised. The enemy didn't attack immediately. They established a perimeter, cutting off retreat routes, positioning heavy weapons, professional tactics from professional soldiers. Webb made the only decision he could. Carter, you stay in your hide. You're invisible up here and you've got the long gun. The rest of us will draw them off, lead them away from your position. Once we break contact, you extract Solo and get this intel back to command. Staff Sergeant, I can provide overwatch while you... That's an order, Carter. You're our insurance policy. If we don't make it, you make sure this intel gets home. He didn't wait for her to respond. Webb, Chen, and Diaz moved out, deliberately making noise, drawing the enemy's attention away from Elisa's position. From her hide, Elisa watched through her scope as her team tried to break through the enemy cordon. She watched Webb put down 3 enemy fighters before taking a burst of automatic fire that spun him around and dropped him. She watched Chen drag him into cover while Diaz laid down suppressing fire. She watched the enemy close in, overwhelming them through sheer numbers. Her finger was on the trigger, her scope tracking enemy fighters, but Webb's last order held her in place. If she revealed her position by firing, the enemy would know someone else was out there. They'd search until they found her. The intel would be lost. So she watched her team die. Watched them fight to the last round, the last breath, the last second. Watched the enemy overrun their position and confirm the kills. Then she watched the enemy search. For 6 hours, fighters combed the area around her hide, moving within 5 feet of her position multiple times, never seeing the sniper who could have killed any of them but stayed frozen in place because the mission came first. When they finally withdrew, Elisa was alone. Her team was dead. Her extraction was 4 days away, and she was deep in enemy territory with no support, limited supplies, and a scope full of targets she hadn't been allowed to engage. She stayed in her hide for another 24 hours, documenting enemy movements, transmitting intelligence, waiting for extraction orders that never came. When she finally checked in with command, the response was devastating. Falcon 3, your team is listed as KIA. Enemy has heavy presence in your extraction zone. We cannot risk assets for single operator recovery. You are ordered to evade to alternate extraction point November 7 and await pickup in 72 hours. Acknowledge. Alternate extraction point November 7 was 15 kilometers away through terrain now swarming with enemy forces who knew Americans were in the area. 72 hours meant 3 more days of evading, surviving, staying invisible. Elisa looked at her rifle, at the valley full of enemy soldiers, at the radio that had just told her she was on her own. Falcon 3 acknowledges, moving to November 7, out. She stayed in position for another hour, using her scope to memorize enemy patrol patterns, counting fighters, identifying leaders, documenting everything. If she was going to be alone behind enemy lines for 3 more days, she was going to make every hour count. As she prepared to displace from her hide, she made herself a promise. If the enemy gave her a clear shot on someone important, someone whose death would mean something, she'd take it. For Webb, for Chen, for Diaz. The mission could go to hell. This was personal now. Day 4. Ghost in the forest. Elisa moved through the forest like smoke, present but intangible, there but not there. 15 kilometers in enemy territory required a kind of fieldcraft most soldiers never master. She traveled at night, rested during the day in hides she built and abandoned, avoided all contact, left no trace. Her ghillie suit was a work of art, layers of natural materials that made her indistinguishable from the forest floor. Her movement technique was perfection, slow, deliberate, always using terrain to mask her profile. Her discipline was absolute. When enemy patrols passed within meters of her position, she became part of the earth itself, barely breathing, thinking slow thoughts, patient as stone. But she wasn't just evading, she was hunting. On the afternoon of day 4, she found a perfect position overlooking a primary enemy supply route. She'd tracked the pattern over 3 days, supply trucks moving south every 6 hours, escorted by armed vehicles, heading toward what intelligence suggested was a major forward operating base. Elisa built a hide in the dense undergrowth 30 meters from the road. From here, she had clear sightlines on a kilometer of the route. Then she waited. At 1400 hours, she heard the vehicles approaching. Through her scope, she identified the convoy: 2 technical trucks with mounted heavy machine guns, 3 supply trucks, another armed escort vehicle. Standard convoy, not worth revealing her position. She let them pass, tracking them through her scope, but not engaging. At 1800 hours, another convoy. This one was different. The lead vehicle was an armored car, unusual for a supply convoy. Through her scope, Elisa could see officers in the vehicles, including what appeared to be a senior commander based on the deference other soldiers showed him. High-value target, worth the risk. She waited until the convoy was halfway through her kill zone, moving at steady speed. Soldiers relaxed because they'd made this run a dozen times without incident. Elisa controlled her breathing, let her heart rate slow, found the natural pause between heartbeats. Her scope was zeroed perfectly. Wind was minimal. Range was 380 meters, easy for her rifle and her skill level. The senior officer was visible in the armored car's open window, gesturing as he spoke to someone beside him. Elisa made her decision. She'd take the shot, then immediately displace. The enemy would know a sniper was in the area, but by the time they organized a search, she'd be gone. She settled her crosshairs on the officer's head, compensated for the vehicle's movement, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The suppressed rifle made barely more noise than a cough. The bullet traveled 380 meters in under half a second and struck the officer exactly where Elisa had aimed. The convoy erupted in chaos. Vehicles stopped. Soldiers jumped out, scanning for threats they couldn't see. Officers shouted orders. The dead man's body was pulled from the vehicle. Elisa was already moving, crawling backward out of her hide, staying low, using terrain to mask her withdrawal. She'd be 500 meters away before they even started searching her position. But she'd made her statement. The enemy wasn't safe. Someone was out here. Someone was watching. Someone was hunting them. Day 6. The SEAL team. Lieutenant Jake Morrison's SEAL team had been in country for 8 days, conducting direct action raids against high-value targets. They were good at it. Surgical strikes, minimal casualties, maximum impact. His 8-man team had hit 6 targets in the past week with 0 friendly losses. The mission brief for Day 8 was straightforward. Move through a specific forest sector to reach an observation point, gather intelligence on a suspected enemy command post, and extract after 48 hours. Intel says this sector is clear, the operations officer had briefed them. Enemy activity is concentrated 10 clicks south. You should have a clean run to your objective. They'd made it 3 kilometers when the ambush hit. The kill zone was a natural choke point. The trail narrowed between rocky outcrops, limiting movement options. The enemy had positioned themselves perfectly, with interlocking fields of fire that covered every escape route. The first burst of automatic fire came from multiple directions simultaneously. Chief Petty Officer Rick Hammer Patterson went down immediately, taking 3 rounds to the chest. His body armor stopped the bullets, but the impact knocked him unconscious. Petty Officer Danny Cruz caught a round in the leg and collapsed, returning fire even as he fell. Morrison and the remaining 5 SEALs dove for cover, but the cover was inadequate. Fallen logs, slight depressions, nothing that could stop sustained fire from 20 enemy fighters who had all the advantages. Reaper 1, contact! We're in a kill zone, taking effective fire from multiple positions, Morrison transmitted, even as bullets tore through the vegetation around him. 2 casualties, requesting immediate air support. The response was devastating. Reaper 1, no air assets available, your location for 30 minutes. Recommend you evade and extract. 30 minutes, they'd all be dead in 5. Morrison looked at his tactical display. Enemy fighters were advancing from 3 directions, moving to flank and overrun their position. His team was putting out effective return fire, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. This was how SEAL teams died, not from lack of skill or courage, but from simple, overwhelming force when help couldn't arrive in time. That's when the first enemy fighter's head exploded. Morrison didn't see the shot, didn't hear it, just saw the result. An enemy fighter who'd been advancing aggressively suddenly dropped like gravity had increased 10-fold. "Who's shooting?" Petty Officer Jason Doc Martinez called out. Before anyone could answer, another enemy fighter fell. Then another. Precise, methodical kills from a sniper position no one could locate. Morrison grabbed his radio. "All stations, who's providing overwatch? I need coordinates on our sniper support." "Reaper 1, no friendly sniper assets are assigned to your sector. Repeat, you have no sniper support." But someone was out there. Someone who'd just killed 3 enemy fighters and was systematically taking apart the ambush. Another enemy fighter fell. Then another. The enemy advance faltered as fighters realized they were being killed by an invisible threat. Morrison watched through his scope as the sniper continued working. Each shot was perfectly placed, headshots at ranges between 300 and 500 meters through dense forest. Professional work from a professional shooter. "Whoever you are," Morrison transmitted on the emergency frequency, "you just saved our lives. Identify yourself." Static for 3 seconds. Then a female voice, calm and professional. "Falcon 3. I'm solo, been behind the lines for 6 days. You walked into my sector. I don't like sharing." Morrison processed that. "Falcon 3, I thought your team was listed as KIA. They are. I'm not. And right now, you've got 10 enemy fighters still operational and moving to flank your position from the east. Suggest you shift your fire to the western approach while I handle the eastern flank." Morrison didn't hesitate. "You heard her, people. Western approach, suppressive fire." His team redirected their fire, and Morrison watched in professional appreciation as the hidden sniper, this Falcon 3, whoever she was, went to work on the eastern flank. 6 enemy fighters were trying to maneuver through thick forest to get behind the SEAL position. They thought they were concealed, thought they were safe. They were wrong. The sniper killed all 6 in under 90 seconds. Each shot was placed with surgical precision, each enemy fighter dropping before they even realized they were being engaged. The remaining enemy fighters broke and ran. They'd come expecting an easy ambush on an outnumbered team. Instead, they'd been decimated by an invisible sniper who killed with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of an executioner. When the firing stopped and the forest fell silent, Morrison did a quick assessment. Patterson was coming around, groggy but alive. Cruz's leg wound was painful but not life-threatening. Everyone else was intact. They should all be dead. Would be dead if not for the sniper they couldn't see. "Falcon 3, Reaper 1, we're secure. What's your status?" "Relocating to alternate position. Stay where you are for 5 minutes, then move directly west 300 meters. You'll find better cover and a defensive position. I'll maintain overwatch." "Negative, Falcon 3. You've been alone for 6 days. Link up with us. We'll extract together." A pause. Then, "Reaper 1, I appreciate the offer, but I'm still mission-focused. I've been documenting enemy positions and movements for 6 days. I've got intelligence that needs to get back to command. Also, the enemy now knows there's a sniper in this sector. They're going to flood this area with search teams. Better if I stay mobile and invisible rather than slowing down your exfiltration." Morrison looked at his team. They were good, but they were also carrying 2 wounded. Movement would be slow. And if this Falcon 3 was right about enemy search teams, they'd be fighting their way out. "Falcon 3, my team owes you our lives. Let us return the favor. We extract together or not at all." Another pause. Then, in a voice that carried a hint of emotion, "Reaper 1, I've been alone for 6 days, lost my whole team. Haven't spoken to anyone except through a radio. You have no idea how good it sounds to hear someone say, 'we' instead of 'you.' Okay, I'll link up, but I'm maintaining a 50-meter offset. If we get hit again, I'm more useful at distance." "Roger that. Move to position and we'll coordinate." Morrison never saw her approach. One moment his team was alone in the forest. The next, a figure materialized from the undergrowth like a ghost, so covered in camouflage that she looked more like a walking bush than a human being. She was smaller than he expected, maybe 5'5", slender build, but she moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent days surviving alone behind enemy lines. Her eyes, the only clearly visible part of her face through the ghillie suit, were sharp and constantly scanning. Her rifle, a suppressed SR-25, was immaculate despite 6 days in the field. Her gear was arranged with obsessive precision. Everything about her screamed professional. "Staff Sergeant Elisa Carter," she said quietly, pulling down the camouflage covering her face. "Sorry about the entrance. I've been living like a forest creature for almost a week. Social skills are rusty." "Lieutenant Jake Morrison, this is what's left of my team." He gestured to the other SEALs, who were staring at her with the kind of respect reserved for someone who'd just saved their lives. "You just killed what? 12 enemy fighters in about 3 minutes. 14, Elisa corrected. 2 more tried to flank from the north. You didn't see them because I got them before they came into view." She paused. "I've been watching enemy movement patterns in this area for 6 days. That ambush wasn't random. They've been setting them on likely American approach routes. You're the 3rd team they've tried to hit. First 2 weren't American, local friendlies. The enemy wiped them out." Morrison felt something cold in his stomach. "How many enemy fighters are in this sector?" "Based on my observations, at least 200, maybe more. They've been reinforcing this area for the past 4 days. Whatever they're protecting, it's important enough to dedicate serious resources." "Any idea what it is?" Elisa pulled out a waterproof map covered in notations. "Best guess? There's a headquarters or command facility about 8 clicks northeast. I've documented senior officers moving through the area, communications equipment being transported, fortification materials. Something big is there." Morrison studied the map. This was intelligence gold, the kind of information that could change operational planning. "Falcon 3, Command needs to see this immediately." "Agreed, which is why we need to get to extraction. My pickup is supposed to be in 18 hours at a location 6 clicks from here. If we move fast and stay ahead of the search teams the enemy's going to send after us, we can make it." Doc Martinez finished treating Cruz's leg wound and Patterson's bruises. Both SEALs were mobile, but movement would be slower than normal. "All right, people," Morrison said. "We've got 6 clicks to cover, 2 wounded, and an entire enemy battalion looking for us. Carter, you're on point. Use that invisible woodcraft of yours to keep us out of trouble. Doc, you stay with the wounded. Everyone else, standard patrol formation. We move fast, we move quiet, and we make it home." Elisa nodded. "One thing, Lieutenant. I've been tracking enemy radio traffic for 6 days. They're coordinated, professional, and they're specifically hunting for American forces. This isn't going to be a simple exfil. We're going to have to fight our way out." "Then let's make sure we're the ones doing most of the shooting." Morrison checked his weapon. "Lead the way, Staff Sergeant." The exfiltration. Elisa moved through the forest like she'd been born there, reading terrain that would have been impossible for others to navigate. Morrison and his team followed, and even these experienced operators were impressed by her woodcraft. She avoided obvious routes, using terrain features that provided concealment while maintaining speed. She spotted enemy positions before they came into view, routing the team around 3 separate enemy patrols that never knew Americans passed within 100 meters. They'd covered 3 kilometers when the enemy found their trail. "Contact rear!" called out Petty Officer Sam Wrench Kowalski, who was pulling security at the back of their formation. "Multiple hostiles, closing fast!" Morrison made the tactical decision. "Carter, how far to a defensible position?" Elisa had already been mapping terrain in her head. 200 meters north, there's a rocky outcrop, good fields of fire, limited approach routes. We can hold there. "Lead the way, double time!" They ran, carrying the wounded, weapons ready. Behind them, enemy fighters were closing the distance, their shouts echoing through the forest. The rocky outcrop was exactly what Elisa had promised, a natural fortress with clear sightlines and solid cover. The team established a defensive perimeter, while Elisa found a sniper position with elevation on the most likely enemy approach. Through her scope, she counted at least 30 enemy fighters moving toward their position in a coordinated assault formation. Professional tactics, professional soldiers. "Reaper 1, you've got 30-plus hostiles inbound, moving in 2 elements. Left flank is 20 fighters, right flank is 10. They'll try to suppress you from the front while flanking from both sides." "Roger that. Can you disrupt their coordination?" "Watch me." Elisa identified the enemy leaders, the ones coordinating movement, using radios, directing other fighters. She knew from 6 days of observation that removing leaders would create chaos in the enemy's tactical cohesion. She found the first target, an officer with a radio, positioned behind the main assault element, directing their movement. Range was 420 meters through moderate vegetation. She compensated for wind, adjusted for the target's movement, controlled her breathing, and fired. The officer dropped, his radio skittering across the ground. Immediately, the enemy's coordinated advance faltered as fighters looked for new orders. Elisa transitioned to her second target, another leader on the left flank. She fired again, and another fighter fell. The enemy assault lost its coordination. Without clear leadership, individual fighters began making their own decisions, breaking formation, exposing themselves. Morrison's team exploited the chaos, directing precise fire at exposed targets. The combination of Elisa's long-range precision and the SEAL's close-range firepower was devastating. But the enemy had numbers. For every fighter that fell, 2 more moved to take their place. They were willing to take casualties to overrun the American position through sheer force. Reaper 1, they're massing for a final assault, Elisa reported. You've got maybe 60 seconds before they rush your position. Copy that. Carter, can you break up their assault? I can try, but I'm going to need to reposition closer to their formation. High risk, but it's our best chance. Do it. Elisa grabbed her rifle and moved with the speed of someone who'd spent 6 days learning to move invisibly. She relocated to a position 50 meters forward of the SEAL defensive line, where she had a different angle on the enemy formation. The enemy was preparing for their assault, fighters checking weapons, officers shouting final orders, the whole formation tensing for the charge. Elisa started shooting. She fired as fast as she could work her bolt, each shot precisely aimed, each round finding a target. She wasn't aiming for confirmed kills anymore. She was aiming to create chaos, to make the enemy think they were being engaged from multiple directions. She fired 10 rounds in 15 seconds, dropping or wounding 8 enemy fighters. The enemy formation disintegrated as fighters dove for cover, trying to locate the new threat. Morrison's team seized the moment. They laid down devastating suppressive fire, forcing the enemy to stay pinned behind inadequate cover. The enemy assault never materialized. Instead, the fighters began withdrawing, dragging wounded comrades, retreating to regroup and reassess. Elisa crawled back to the SEAL position, her ghillie suit torn and dirty, her face streaked with camouflage paint and sweat. Threat neutralized, she reported. But they'll be back with reinforcements. We need to move. Morrison helped her to her feet. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen. You just assaulted 30 enemy fighters alone. Didn't assault them, just made them think they were being engaged from multiple angles. Perception is reality in combat. She checked her ammunition. I'm down to 40 rounds. Need to make them count for the next 3 clicks. They moved out immediately, knowing the enemy would be organizing a larger response. Elisa rotated to rear security, using her scope to watch their back trail for pursuit. At the 2-click mark, they ran into another problem, an enemy checkpoint blocking their most direct route to the extraction point. Reaper 1, I've got eyes on the checkpoint, Elisa reported from her forward position. 8 fighters, defensive positions, heavy machine gun. They're stopping and checking anyone moving through this sector. Can we go around? Not without adding 4 hours to our movement, and we don't have 4 hours. Enemy search teams are spreading out across this entire sector. Morrison studied the situation through his binoculars. The checkpoint was well positioned, with good fields of fire. A frontal assault would be costly. Ideas? He asked. Elisa was quiet for a moment, analyzing angles and possibilities. Then, I can take out the machine gun and 4 of the fighters from my current position. The other 4 will be in cover I can't engage. That's when you assault. While they're distracted by my fire, you move in fast and finish them. That puts you alone and exposed. If they identify your position, they won't. I've been invisible for 6 days. I can be invisible for 60 more seconds. Morrison made the call. All right, on your signal. Elisa positioned herself with clear sightlines on the checkpoint. She identified her targets in order, machine gunner first, then the 4 fighters with the best defensive positions. The other 4 would be exposed once their support was eliminated. She controlled her breathing, found her rhythm, and began shooting. The machine gunner dropped first, slumping over his weapon. Before anyone could react, Elisa had transitioned to her second target, an officer coordinating the checkpoint operations. He fell with a round through his chest. 2 more shots, 2 more targets down. The remaining 4 fighters scrambled for cover, trying to identify where the shots were coming from, shouting into radios for support. That's when Morrison's team hit them. The SEALs assaulted the checkpoint from 2 directions simultaneously, using speed and violence of action to overwhelm the disoriented defenders. The engagement was over in 30 seconds. 8 enemy fighters dead, 0 American casualties. "Checkpoint secure," Morrison reported. "Carter, nice shooting." "Just doing my job. Let's keep moving." They covered the final kilometer without significant contact. A few enemy patrols spotted in the distance, but nothing that couldn't be avoided with good routing and tactical patience. When they finally reached the extraction point, Elisa allowed herself the first moment of relief she'd felt in 6 days. The clearing was secure, her intel was safe, and she was surrounded by Americans who'd proven they wouldn't leave anyone behind. The extraction helicopter came in low and fast, rotors creating a storm of noise and downdraft. As the team loaded aboard, Morrison grabbed Elisa's arm. "Staff Sergeant, when we get back, I'm writing you up for every medal I can think of. What you did out here, 6 days alone, the intelligence you gathered, the lives you saved, that's the kind of thing legends are made of." Elisa looked at him with exhausted eyes. "Sir, I just want a hot shower, real food, and about 16 hours of sleep. Save the medals for people who won't be embarrassed by the attention." "Too late. You're getting the attention whether you want it or not." As the helicopter lifted off and turned toward friendly territory, Elisa looked down at the forest where she'd spent 6 days living like a ghost, where she'd lost her team, where she'd proven that sometimes the most dangerous person on the battlefield is the one nobody knows is there. She touched her rifle, the weapon that had kept her alive, that had saved 8 SEALs, that had become an extension of her will over 144 hours of survival. "Good job, girl," she whispered to the rifle. "We made it." 3 weeks later. The debriefing took 2 days. Elisa's intelligence on enemy positions, movements, and capabilities was so detailed that it changed operational planning for the entire sector. Her documentation of the suspected enemy command facility led to a successful strike that eliminated a major enemy headquarters. The medal ceremony was smaller, more private, just the SEAL team she'd saved, their squadron leadership, and a few senior officers who understood the value of what she'd accomplished. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hendricks pinned the silver star on Elisa's dress uniform and spoke words that would follow her for the rest of her career. Staff Sergeant Carter exemplifies the finest traditions of special operations. Alone behind enemy lines, after losing her entire team, she could have focused solely on survival and extraction. Instead, she continued her mission, gathered critical intelligence, and when the opportunity arose to save American lives, she did so without hesitation. Her actions directly resulted in saving 8 American operators and providing intelligence that degraded enemy capabilities across an entire sector. This is what it means to be a special operations warrior. After the ceremony, Morrison pulled Elisa aside. "My team wants you to know something. We're putting in a request for you to be permanently attached to our squadron. We need people with your skills, your composure under pressure, your ability to operate independently." Elisa looked at the 8 SEALs who'd become her brothers in those final kilometers through enemy territory. "Sir, I appreciate that, but I need to ask, are you requesting me because of my skills, or because you feel obligated for what happened?" Morrison smiled. "Carter, I've been doing this job for 12 years. I've worked with some of the best operators in the world. When I say I want you on my team, it's because you're one of the best I've ever seen. Gender doesn't enter into it. Capability does, and you've got capability in spades." "Then yes, sir. I'd be honored." 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Elisa Carter was back in the field, this time as the permanent designated marksman for Morrison's SEAL team. She'd participated in 8 operations, with her precision fire support enabling mission success in situations where conventional approaches would have failed. But she never forgot those 6 days alone in the forest, never forgot Webb, Chen, and Diaz, never forgot what it felt like to be invisible, to be the hidden threat that enemies never saw coming. Some warriors fought loud, with machine guns and grenades and aggressive tactics. Elisa Carter fought quiet, with patience, precision, and the kind of skill that made impossible shots look routine. And in the special operations community, word spread about the sniper who'd spent 6 days behind enemy lines alone, who'd saved an entire SEAL team from annihilation, who proved that sometimes the most dangerous warrior on the battlefield is the one you never see until it's too late. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage.